Hello everybody, and welcome to another GovGrants tutorial video. My name is David Dabb, and today we're going to be talking about Grantor initiated amendments, or LMG initiated amendments. Now, just like with the subrecipient initiated amendments, amendments are how we're going to amend the contract that we have with LMG, or the subaward that we have with LMG. The amendment types that LMG has access to are a bit different than the types that you, the subrecipient, will have access to. A couple of points of note just before we start. First is, just because GovGrants has access to certain amendment types doesn't necessarily mean that LMG will use them when it comes to creating the amendments. Some LMG grant programs might not allow those amendment types. The next part is the different amendment types will go through different internal approval processes at LMG. Some of them will be very short and easy to approve. Others might take some additional time to approve due to their complexity. As far as what I'm going to show you today, though, I'm only going to be showing what your part is when it comes to doing amendments. For the most part, when LMG initiates an amendment request, they will complete the bulk of the work for you, and then they will send you the amendment request in order to get you to finalize certain aspects of it. For example, today I'm going to walk us through a funding change amendment. So let's go ahead and get started. First, again, I'm logged in as my user, David Dabb here. And at this point in time, on the LMG side of things, I've already initiated a funding change amendment. A funding change amendment is an amendment where LMG can add or remove some funds to the subaward through that amendment process. So it's one of the more complex amendment types, which is why I want to show it to you versus one of the easier types, because if you know the harder type, the easier types are easier. So yeah, let's just dive right in. So first, let's go to our pending tasks, because when LMG sends you an amendment, you'll get an email and a pending task. I have a lot of pending tasks here, so let's go ahead and filter it down to just those about the amendments. So I'll just search for amendment here. And then this is the task we're interested in, this task for submitting the amendment request. So let's go ahead and get started on that, and that will take us right to the record that we need to go to. Alrighty. So now that we're here on the funding change amendment request, a couple of things to point out. First, LMG, again, did most of the work for us. So the overview, LMG selected the amendment type, LMG entered the justifications, they entered the impact, they altered the focus areas if need be, and then they filled out the requested change in budget. In this case, LMG is going to be adding an additional $10,000 to our budget. Now, LMG has the ability to also propose a change to your budget in order to fit this updated change of budget. When I did this from the LMG side, I didn't do that. So what you can see here is the original subaward budget was $50,000 in this one line item, and there's no other budget anywhere else because I made it very simple. And then you can see the revised subaward budget is still $50,000. So no change has been made yet in order to take on this additional $10,000. Like I said, LMG could have updated the budget for you and then sent it to you just to have you review it, maybe change it, and then send it back. But in this case, I wanted us to go in and just do it, because LMG might handle it that way as well. Well, where they'll tell you, we have an additional $10,000 to give you. You go into your budget and you figure out where you're going to spend it. So what we're going to do here is we can come in here and we can add the $10,000 to this budget by clicking this add line items icon, this square with the arrow coming out of it. Or we can add the $10,000 across multiple budget categories, whatever we see fit. I'm just going to add it to this same line here, just to keep, again, just to keep things easy. So let's go ahead and click that icon, the add line items icon. And that's going to open a pop-up window. And here you can see our original budget that we put in here. So here's our prior award budget. Here's our awarded budget, which we can change if we want to by clicking edit here. We can also add new line items if we want to do it that way as well. So we can add money to our existing budget. We can do it through adding new line items, and it's all good. So let's just add a new line item. So I'm going to just call this, test title and test narrative. And I'm going to add the $10,000 here. And I'm just going to add a 10% cash match and non-cash match just to keep things nice and easy. And we'll save that. Now that it's been saved, we can see that there was no prior awarded budget for this line, which is fine. There's an awarded budget here. And now we're all set. So now our new awarded budget is now a total of $60,000 here, which is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. $50,000 was our original amount, plus $10,000 gives us 60. So we're all set. And those are the main changes that you would need to make for a funding change amendment. Some other types of amendments that LMG has access to are things like scope of work change, where they might adjust the key performance indicators or the descriptions in order to adjust the scope of the subaward. Another big amendment type that they have access to is what's called a periodic renewal. A periodic renewal is how they're going to move from one budget period to the next in a multi-year grant. So if LMG enters into a grant agreement with you guys for the course of, let's say, 3 years, for example, but they only give you funding 1 year at a time, they'll create a grant for 3 years, and then they'll create the first year's subaward, and then when it's time to go from year 1 to year 2, they will do what's called a periodic renewal amendment in order to add the additional funds for the next budget period within that 3-year grant period. So that's another important amendment type that LMG may or may not use depending on what kind of agreement you guys enter into. So that was the bulk of what we need to do. The rest of the tabs you'll already be pretty familiar with. The next tab is the Files tab, where you can add additional files if you need to, and additional notes. Excuse me. Next, we have the History tab, which you're also already pretty familiar with, where you can have snapshots. And the Collab tab, which you're already pretty familiar with, where you can use My Feed to collaborate internally, and where you can use messages to send emails from the system and track email chains in the system that way. So we've completed everything that we have to. From here, the next steps of the process are to submit it back to LMG. LMG will then review your changes, make sure everything is okay according to their standards. If everything's okay, great. It will go through the approval process. Once approved, LMG will create another subaward that may or may not result in another contract. And once that new subaward is activated, the changes in this amendment request will go into effect. If LMG has an issue with what you've done here, LMG will be able to send it back so that way you can make any necessary corrections. All right, so let's go ahead and submit this back to LMG. And that's going to wrap things up for us as far as the amendment process goes. Oh, there is one final thing before I forget. One final point. There are some amendment types that are extremely simple from the subrecipient perspective. In particular, a budget period change amendment, where LMG might give you guys a no-cost extension. So LMG could create a budget period change amendment, update the budget period, and when they send the amendment to you, there's nothing that you need to enter, no data you need to input. LMG's only thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to go in, review the changes that LMG is making to the budget period, and then acknowledge the amendment request. And that will immediately send it back to LMG with no data entry required from your part. So there's some amendments that do require changes, like funding change amendments where you need to make some adjustments to your budget. And there's other amendment types like budget period change where you just simply have to acknowledge the amendment. And that's pretty much it. That's all there is regarding the Grantor initiated amendments. As always, I hope that this has been informational for you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care and have an amazing day.